Indecision means slow, and slow does not survive.
Sophia Athas is the founder and creative director of Hatrik House, a boundary-pushing creative studio specializing in brand strategy and communications. She's led work for global names like Sephora, Microsoft, Afterpay, Bumble, and Butterboy.
The biggest misconception about branding is that, hey, I've got a really sexy brand, of course it's going to be successful. That's not the case at all.
Why is indecision the demise for a founder?
That's such a loaded question. A lot of founders start with their ideas because they think they are the majority, when most of the time they're the minority. You can come up with a cool product and something that looks sexy and amazing, but if there's no one there to buy it, why are we here?
Why do you do this? What do you get out of building brands?
I love coming up with ideas and building things, even since I was small.
Do you think that AI is going to collapse the agency industry? This episode is brought to you by Wix Studio. So for listeners who think branding is just a cool logo, how do you as an agency owner define what branding is and what that means to you?
I knew this was going to be the first question. It is more than a logo, and we always say that. I think it's about storytelling. That sounds like very cliche, but I think coming up with layers for a brand, especially at the moment, most markets, they're so crowded. People are coming up with products. You can come up with a product really easily these days. And I think that's the thing. We get so many inquiries. We have a lot of founders come across our desk. We have even big legacy brands create like offshoots of their products, and they all think it's the best idea, which I think you have to think that as a founder, but I feel like it's our job as an agency or a good agency partner to really bring them back down to earth and go, what are you actually selling? Like, what are you trying to give to your customer outside of just that product that they're receiving or service or experience? It's deeper than that.
It's a hard thing to explain. Yeah. And for example, we were in a workshop today and the client was saying, hey, our product is exceptional. I'm like, that's great. Everyone says the same thing. All your competitors.
Like you wouldn't be here if you didn't think that.
Totally.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with having an exceptional product. And, we hear from the likes of Steve Jobs, like product is everything. I agree. What is that additional layer? Like how do you define what it is beyond the product, beyond the solution you're solving with your service? How would you define what that branding layer is?
I think it's different for everyone, and I feel like that there's no blanket rule. Like, yes, you can have templates. We always start at similar, positions when we're thinking about a brand and strategy, whether that is from what does it sound like, what do they look like, what is it packaged like, but it has to be tailored, and it has to be tailored for the audience as well. You can't sell to everyone. I think that's the other thing. So thinking about, at the end of the day, who's walking into your shop front or who's converting a sale online or sliding into the DMs on socials, they're all coming from different walks of life for a different reason. So you have to tailor your messaging to them. I think also just having fun. Like branding is not that serious.
I would agree.
It shouldn't be serious.
It's another layer where it's an experience.
Yes.
And it's like if you were to say, I'm hosting an event, it's for my birthday party, people usually ask, well, what is the dress code? What's the vibe? What are we going to be doing? Are there any activities that I need to dress for? The branding is more about like, well, this is what the event is, how you're going to dress, how you're going to feel, the vibe, the aura, the presence of what that is going to look like. Just saying we have a great product is like saying I got a birthday party.
But also a great product, it's almost easy to make the product because there are resources out there to be able to do that these days, but it's competitive. So how are you going to make the cookie or the lipstick that is formulated in exactly the same way stand out next to each other?
Totally. And then even if you had the first great product and you went to the market and then someone tries to copycat or steal it, how do you build a
Innovation.
moat to
Yeah.
protect what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, totally. I think that's the other thing. Brands can't remain stagnant. You just have to move really fast, which sometimes I hate that about marketing and branding. I think there's a balance between you have to have integrity and stay true to where you came from, where it started, what the core values are of it, but also you have to keep innovating. The brand has to grow. It has to move with the times. Even when we opened Hatrik House 7 years ago, that looked really different to what it looks like today. TikTok didn't even exist, I don't think. Yeah, which is a huge platform for selling, marketing. The generation that grew up buying the beauty product back then was hardly even able to own a phone.
Yeah.
So I think, it's
like
not
the
getting
7
complacent.
Yeah, it's like the 7 P's of marketing are kind of hard to apply to TikTok because TikTok just seems like
it's
the Wild
rogue.
West.
It's so rogue.
It's so rogue.
It's
that
scary.
It's like any given week, you're like, that strategy's ick now. It's new. It's a new thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we just zoom out for a moment, just to give people a few handles on a few different things that we're probably going to unpack today, if we're taking the word brand, branding, brand strategy, brand identity, brand design, if we just separate them and even add in like, let's say, content, advertising and marketing, how do you delineate the differences between these things? Because oftentimes people contort them into being the interchangeable same thing with a different phrase, but they're actually quite different.
They are. And I think at Hatrik House, that's what we've tried to do in building our different departments. So we've got our content and design, which is your graphics, it's your logo, it's your packaging, your very tangible things that you can like hold, feel, touch in a brand and product. And then you've got communications, which is obviously how you're talking to your audience, how that product gets out there, how you're protecting it when people are talking about it online, in the media, how you're pitching it, and then also production. So how you're creating content around it, campaigns, whether that's a huge campaign that's digitally produced in a big studio or on an iPhone. It's completely different for every client. And our whole thing is that we do it all under one roof. So having the different elements of the branding and how you build a brand, we're able to do it without having to reach out to third parties unless they're specialists in the creatives or, specifically to projects. We work with a lot of contractors, but I really believe to have control over it, you need your people sitting in the same room.
Totally.
Like your brand people.
Totally. And I think sometimes business owners tend to go, this branding guide is built, job done. And it's, well, hang on a second. There's so much that goes into it.
There's nothing worse than a brand identity document that goes for like 250 pages. And we always get them because we'll come in at either the production stage or, hey, we want to do a campaign. We've got our brand identity. And you look at this document and you think, well, it's a logo and you've just given me the logo in about 50 different shades of grey. It doesn't really mean anything.
So let's define this. So like if we take, if we just separate, okay, branding, brand design, and brand strategy, let's move content and advertising to the wayside momentarily. But if we just add some context here, because people get confused about these things all the time. So if you could, I guess, from your agency's perspective, define, like, we define brand as branding, which is like the doing thing, and then the strategy and the identity and the design. How do you separate it, and how do you tend to, let's say someone were to say, I'm confused, I don't understand the difference in all these things. How do you guys define them?
That's an interesting question because I think, again, it depends on the brief we get. We have founders or legacy heritage brands, as I said, coming and wanting a logo, for example. That's starting from absolute scratch. We even help come up with names, so naming strategy, ideation around taglines, copy, things like that. It's almost like the baby is not even conceived yet. We're helping that happen. Then you could also come in after that stage where they hand us the 250-page brand identity book and we have to sift through it and really figure out what is important, what isn't. Because I think what I've found, and maybe it's part of my personality where I like moving quickly and I'm more macro than micro in the way that I think, is sometimes it doesn't matter as much as we think. Like, yes, a logo is important, but some of the most impressive brands I've worked with, the logo's been sketched on a notepad and then vectorized on Photoshop once without a single edit. And it's still an awesome logo today. And no one's flinching.
Polisher and Citibank.
Exactly.
Sketch it over coffee at
Starbucks
lunch.
was like that too.
Yeah.
And
the craziest
Nike.
stories, Nike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's like, again, our job as an agency to care, because it is really important to think about color, look, feel, curves, typography, things like that. But also it's just not that deep. The deepness comes with the other layers around it. So yes, we love working on brand identity, but we would never do a brand identity without a brand strategy. And that could come prior to even thinking about the name or the logo, or after if they've already engaged another agency to do it.
Is there a better time to jump in and do brand strategy? Because we get asked all the time, is it better I do this when I'm thinking about the idea, or like I should go to market with an MVP and then brand it?
I think some very successful founders have come up with the product and their business idea way before their brand. And that's awesome because they've tested it. They know that it's a good product, as we were saying before. So they need something to like wrap it up in a nice bow, and that's our job. But then the other side is they can be attracted to the shininess of creating a brand, but the product is still in formulation. It's still needing heaps of work. It's still IP issues, patents are pending. I don't think there's a one set journey.
There's so many entry points, right? Because sometimes, depending on the founder as well, like sometimes I find that if people have a lot of experience in branding, they typically do it first. Not always, but they tend to come back and go, okay, we know how much of a headache it is to kind of build a brand and then change everything later on because you have to repackage and reconstitute everything. So I find that like second and third time founders are like, let's just get the branding out of the way first. And they also value the benefit of the naming and the ideation, and they kind of want to hit it with a bang. I
think if it's like your second, third rodeo, I trust that the brand can come second.
Yes.
But I think brand strategy, you need that before packaging, before a logo, before colors.
So let's define that for you. What is brand strategy? And I understand what you're saying. Before we choose colors and a font, a logo, like that's communication language, which is great. But like, what are we communicating, which is typically strategy?
Yeah. And I think strategy is always, it's the elephant in the room. When you propose a strategy to a client, it's almost like this invisible thing that you have to really push for. And I think out of all of our services, that's the one thing that is the hardest sell because it's not as tangible. Strategy is your IP and your experience of coming up with ideas for someone when it's related to branding. Obviously, there are different types of strategies, but in my world, that's what it is. And so when you can't show them a brand strategy that you've done or necessarily what that is before you've done it, it's really hard to get it across the line. I've had clients have to sit on 5 different sort of sense check calls to even ask me, so what's in your strategy? But that's the point of strategy. You have to trust me.
It's a paradox.
Basically.
Yeah. It's a paradox. It's like, well, what are you going to do for me? Well, we don't know yet, but we're going to do strategy.
Exactly.
But what is strategy? Well, it's like a lot of stuff.
And I think like you also can't I believe you can't be a strategist or come up with strategy on your first day. I think throughout time, and because I've had experience and my team now has had experience and has grown a portfolio, people are willing to trust us with their brand strategy. But I think it's still a precious thing of...
It's a weird thing to explain. And I was having this conversation with our creative director of strategy recently. And we were having this discussion around, okay, we're going to look at hiring another strategist. And we're like, how do we find that person? Because it's a really hard role to fulfill, because you're trying to find someone who can speak to a business owner, command a room, think neurodivergently on the spot.
It's the two different sides of the brain.
It's the two different sides. Yeah. You have to have really high IQ, really high EQ, and you have to kind of dance between the two, because when you're hosting someone who's made 10, 25 mil and they potentially have an ego and a business partner and, you know, a chief marketing in the room, and you're trying to juggle them, you're trying to juggle the idea, you're trying to rip apart their old brand because it definitely doesn't work, and you're trying to think of all these things at the same time. How do you hire for that role? So it's a weird role where you're constantly almost like tissue testing like 30 things in your head at once. You're playing 3D chess.
You are, and it's also, I think, with the brand, if you're doing a brand strategy, it's the perfect balance between creative thinking, ideas, versus thinking like a business woman or man of, is this actually a commercially viable idea?
Yeah, do people want it? They're going to buy it?
Yeah, is it going to work?
Yeah.
Because you can come up with, of course, a sexy campaign that would cost $500,000 to produce, but that's not helpful for my founder client that has a budget of $50K. So I think smart strategy is being able to come up with creative within the parameters of resources.
Right. So it's like
available.
Someone saying, I want you to make me the best car in the world. And you're like, hang on a second.
With $5.
Yeah, I got $5.
Yeah.
And you're like, how do you drive?
Yeah.
And you have to almost engineer the brand strategy to the person, because we've done this in the past. I think early days we made the mistake, and I'm sure you've had the same experience where you've like over-engineered a brand and then you've given it to someone and it's like handing, you know, a machine gun to a toddler. You're like, they cannot handle this.
That's another, I mean, I think that's like part 2. That could be its own podcast in itself, but from strategy to execution is a whole art form. And I'm still trying to figure that out with my team. I think, again, ideas that's our wheelhouse. And I feel like if I was confident in anything, I could walk into a room with the best idea. But that only is so helpful to someone who's paying you for that idea. I think you have to be able to also know how to recruit and sort of rally your resources to execute on it. Otherwise, the shiny stuff, it loses its shine really quickly.
What would you classify as the shiny stuff?
Big picture thinking, like big campaigns, wild activation ideas that it's so fun to come up with that. And you see clients' faces, they light up and they see a mock-up of a billboard with their new product that hasn't launched to market yet. And everyone in the room is like, wow, this is it. This is why we spent all night, you know, for a year trying to come up with this. But then if you can't actually execute on that, it feels like an empty promise almost.
Right. So you have to have the creative strategy.
Yeah.
You have to make it functional, and so you can get tactical and make it happen.
Exactly.
And then it has to...
And then know how to do it.
And is it going to commercially work? So you can have the best roadmap, the best creative, but then the product sucks.
And I think that's what I've learned over the years is there's a cost to making things and producing things. And at the end of the day, it's not my money that the client has to spend. It's their budget. It's their capital or whatever they've raised to get this product off the ground. They're trusting you in taking direction of where they should spend that money, but ultimately it's up to them to either have it or not. And I think I used to not have the confidence to say, you know, you can do this, but it's going to cost you $200,000 to get it looking like that visual, or the packaging that you want. It looks amazing because it's expensive. And I think that's the reality of it. It's not cheap. And we all know cost of living, cost of doing business, cost of creating things is going up. So it's that fine line as a creative agency to be proposing ideas as well that just will never see the light of day either. I think it's that balance of inspiring, but also being a realist.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes I have to be a bit of a bitch because I'm like, send me the brand guide. They send me the brand guide. They're like, what do you think? And it's like handing me their baby. And I'm like, have you considered another color palette?
Yeah. It's subjective. Strategy
it's totally subjective. And then they're
subjective.
like, yeah. So take me into this a little deeper. When it comes to the brand strategy and the visual identity, you're saying it doesn't matter which side they come to you with first, but it's more about like what problem they're trying to solve next.
Yeah, I like that we have brands and founders and marketing teams coming to us at all stages and from all angles. I think that's why I started a house or an agency, because I don't think I would have liked to work on just one brand for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it then makes it's a whole stage for my team in the inquiry phase to figuring out where that founder is in the journey to really understand where we have to come in and make the most difference. For example, having the hard conversation, if that 250-page brand identity document looks so bad, objectively bad.
To us, it's objective. To them, they're like, it's my baby. I love it.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It's like telling them that their baby is ugly. That's a really hard conversation to have. And so you have to be able to back yourself with your name doesn't stick. The logo I've seen before, things like that. And then once you make these big comments, really owning what you're about to propose as the change as well. Backing yourself is a big thing.
Business owners, if you're stuck using one platform for every project, you're probably stuck in a growth bottleneck. More clients means more hires, which just adds noise and cuts into profits. To break the loop, you need flexible tools that don't stretch your resources. Wix Studio is a smart addition to your business toolkit. Intuitive by design, your team can quickly master the platform and focus on the work that matters the most. Then keep up the momentum with a built-in management tool, a unified dashboard, reusable assets, and a Figma plugin that turns static design into launch-ready websites. With robust native business solutions like bookings, e-commerce, and events, you can take any project at any scale without the added cost of third-party plugins. Plus, Wix Studio is a low-maintenance platform, meaning you can redirect the client budget towards real growth initiatives. Think more value for clients, steady income streams, and stronger relationships. To get started, simply go to wix.com/studio. Now, when people approach you and they typically reach out to go, hey, we need help, what are the different stages that they tend to look at branding at?
I think I hate saying that there's like a slightly different approach every time, but we are a small enough team and a I guess nimble enough team that we really create packages that are bespoke to the client. So one could come with a product and, as I said, not even have a name, and it is a whole strategy around naming, what inspired them, what is going to show up on the shelf when the first shop opens. The lease hasn't even been signed by that stage. Working with the interior designers that are building the shop to then figure out color palettes, things like that. Or it could be a rebrand, which is kind of slicing up what's already there and relaunching something. So giving life to a product that has already existed, completely different.
Yeah, so you have like kind of pre-brand, which is like they're kind of still at genesis or the
It's
molding
like
of
formulation stage.
the formulation stage. That's a great way of phrasing it. The rebrand stage, which is typically, hey, something's not quite working here.
We need a rebirth. We need a, wow, all this birth metaphor.
I love it. It's on brand for you today. Yeah. Okay, but if you were to go, okay, cool, like pre-formulation, and then there's like a rebrand. Some people get a little scared about the phrasing rebrand. Would you say there's like a hybrid maybe in between where they're kind of like, we want a bit of a tune up, and then it kind of unfolds into a rebrand most of the time? Do you experience that?
I feel like rebrands are dangerous, risky, almost harder than branding from scratch. I feel like we've seen massive success stories. I mean, big success stories. We've had New Balance that died for a while and they came back and just owned the dad shoe and did it so well. And that was all they went hard on. And I feel like that stuck and it did really well.
I saw a great campaign for them, and it was like for dads in Ohio and models in Paris.
Exactly.
And I was like, that's such a great tagline.
We always use that. And I think that's a success of a rebrand, repositioning. And then you've got brands that just haven't been able to stick it, even if they've tweaked their logo 3 times, launched with a different color. I don't know, but I think that goes back to the storytelling, and it's not just about a logo in that instance. A rebrand is so much more than that, because you've already got legacy and you've already got history that you can play off. It almost should be easier for you to talk and come up with stories as opposed to starting from scratch, if that makes sense.
Why is it you would say that rebranding is dangerous or more dangerous than creating something from scratch?
Because I believe you only have one chance at a rebrand. You can't, I guess it depends on different phases of where you're at in the journey. Different if it's a year in and you have to change because of, copyright issues or trademark issues. But huge brands, I think Burberry has actually done this recently, where they've launched with a new logo, slightly different to the last, but if you weren't a Burberry fan or in the industry, you'd have no idea. They've brought back the cobalt blue, beautiful colorway, and then they've gone really hard on campaigns, but it hasn't affected sales. They're still struggling to innovate on product. And now the narrative has become, well, it didn't work. It's not about actually the rebrand or the creative. So I think it's risky. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the most famous stories I've seen, one which is Gapgate. I don't know if
Yes.
you remember that.
Yes.
Where it's like they rebranded everything, they re-stitched their logo on everything, re-signed all their stores, and I think they spent like near $100 million to go back on the brand. I think the brand lasted that of all of 8 days, and it was so catastrophic that they just went back to their old brands.
Which I love their campaigns recently. I'm not sure if you've been following that journey, but they've recently got a new creative director and they've gone back to their legacy and just simplicity of what Gap was. And I always use it as a case study for our team and our strategy of sometimes you just don't need to reinvent the wheel 1,000 times either.
Well, it's always that new CMO that wants to prove themselves, just jumped at the helm. Like if you see what happened with Jaguar, like we'll see how that turns out. But like, for example,
that's an interesting one.
New CMO at the helm and they just reconstitute everything.
What do you think of that?
I think it's interesting because I think here's the thing is like Jaguar was going south.
Yeah.
Love it or hate it, right?
Yeah.
If you just purely look at the challenge that they had, they're in a declining market. People were not buying the cars. And one could argue that they're on every headline. So maybe mission accomplished.
Yeah, true.
But it's like, number two, they have to then back that up and like actually start selling vehicles. It'd be interesting to see if they make a ton of sales. But I think the challenge I personally had was like, I look at luxury cars like Porsches and, Lamborghinis and Ferraris and things like that. And I even considered buying a Jag. But then like looking at how they kind of hit the marketing, I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to be an aggressive early adopter of a heritage brand. So it just felt like such a radical shift for me that I couldn't justify how intense it was. It sounds good on paper, but man, if they pull it off, it'll be the rebrand of the century. But I think my fear is that they didn't actually try to connect with a target audience. It felt to me more like a campaign around an agenda versus like, hey, what do the market actually want for a car? That seemed like it was completely missing from the strategy for me.
But also, at the end of the day, that product is a very expensive conversion for a very particular customer.
It's a very particular customer.
So it's not just about the logo.
No, it's not just about the logo. I'm talking about like the whole thing. Because like if you're selling a high-end Rolls-Royce looking vehicle at a high price point that's slash EV, and then you constitute that with the messaging on top of that, which they did, that's a very niche market.
Very niche. But I kind of like the guts that they had to do it.
Yeah, tell me what you think. Like, what's your opinion? What's your hot take? What do you think about the Jaguar rebrand?
Well, as you said, if you're comparing it to their competitors of all the legacy luxury car brands, Ferrari or Porsche are never going to do that.
Never.
Ever. Like the logo is almost too sacred to even look at. Yeah, so I think in that sense, someone in that room has in the strategy phase has obviously said, this is our opportunity to stand out, make a difference. Yeah, pivot, but it's risky. I don't know if it will. I don't know the answer. Yeah.
No, I hear what you're saying. I champion the fact that they went for it. I question the strategy behind it and like where it landed, but only time will tell, which I'm excited for.
But I also think that's another example of that sort of industry, like the car industry, luxury cars. We've seen it a lot with the F1, and that's a great case study as well. With the Netflix documentary, they've now got the biggest Louis Vuitton sponsorship off the back of it, and they're backed by that for all of the Grand Prix. That they're innovating. That's still innovation. That's still acting like a modern.
What exactly you mean there?
Well, F1 and Ferrari, Porsche, McLaren, all of those brands, they're old school. They were once designed for an old rich man, basically. But with some clever marketing partnerships, the way that they're storytelling through Netflix documentaries, bringing in the identity of the drivers, the drama, they've been able to then foster these partnerships with fashion labels. And all of a sudden, people like myself or younger care. And we're buying into it.
I remember watching Drive to Survive season 1, and I was telling everyone about it, and everyone's like, what is that? And I was like, it's this F1 thing. And I got way into F1 because I remember watching F1 as a kid growing up, like, yeah, okay, cool, cars going around a track. But then I watched the documentary. I was like, whoa, these guys hate each other. There's stories here. There's enemies here. There's friends. There's allies. There's like tire degradation and all these things you have to think about. And it's like being the greatest marketing play of all time is to like, let's radically storytell all the ugly stuff, all the glorious stuff, and everything that happens.
But that's what I mean by it's clever. It's clever brand innovation and strategy in a really traditional industry.
I see.
And I think you don't need to rebrand like a Jaguar. Not that I know that they're different, not necessarily just F1. But you don't need to necessarily rebrand to innovate and keep progressing.
Because to me, it felt like a mass abandonment of their current target audience.
Yeah.
And it's almost like
always
Red Bull,
a risk.
Which is a risk. It's almost like Red Bull going, hey, like we're no longer about extreme sports. We're about like car meditation.
Exactly.
And like middle finger to all our target demographic.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. And you could argue, well, like, you know, older white men aren't cool or what have you. And I would disagree with that. But like I would say like there's that zeitgeist around it. And then this radical pivot just felt for me a little unfounded.
That's something that we always get asked and pushed on in our strategies is, so we're here because we don't want to ostracize the audience that we're talking to and the customer we've grown with, but we need to acquire a new one. And that's always the hardest part about you don't want to create these campaigns that are too controversial or triggering or niche in the message, but also they're the ones that stick or make headlines and get press and make an impact in this very noisy world. So I think when you can successfully do that and have the OG customer still engaged while also talking to the daughter or the niece, nephew, younger generation, that's successful branding.
So instead of the abandonment, it's the
Yeah.
expansion.
Yeah.
Instead of contracting one market and
Yeah.
repositioning over here, it's about like, how do we continue to scale and grow?
Exactly.
Because I felt like McLaren did a really great job of like bringing in a younger audience. Because I remember once upon a time, McLarens were kind of for the older generation. Now it feels like, because they've got these young drivers that are 18
Well, it's
and 19.
with the drivers.
The drivers
Hot young
are
drivers.
young maverick dudes. And it's like, I want a McLaren now. Like, it's kind of cool. So you're saying through storytelling, in many ways, shapes and forms, you can bring new life to your brand if it's a legacy brand.
Yeah, well, I also think that goes back to what we were saying before of smart design and creative is also being able to make more money for your client, really. So if you can duplicate their audience and not ostracize or stop talking to a certain market, but just increase it, expand it, there's no truer success than the dollars go up. There's more people in the shop door. There's more customers willing to engage with what you're trying to sell, as opposed to, oh, now New Balance is just for the supermodel. No, we're still selling to dads and we're still selling to the dags, but we're also cool again. So I think, yeah, but it's hard.
It's a juxtaposition brand because in many ways it's seen one way in one part of the world and another way in America.
Yeah. And you also don't want to feel like you're trying to be friends with everyone and talk to everyone. I think that you have to segment your marketing and, segment your messaging for those different people and different audiences. But your overall brand should appeal to the people that have grown old with you. You can't stop talking to them.
Would you agree that then if a brand is established, that it needs to, I guess, when it's figuring out a brand strategy, it's all about expansion or how do we continue to scale? With a new brand, do you think that's more about trying to be a little bit more niche at the beginning?
It's hard, right? Because I think these days, just the way that the world is, everyone seems to have their hobbies, right? You're either part of a run club or you love a certain coffee trend that you're chasing, and that's sort of what you want to do. Fashion is really a big part of people's identities, how they look, how they feel. Beauty is quite niche as well. You've got the beauty, the no makeup, but then you've also got the high glam. You can't be something for everyone. Like, I think you have to know your customer and know your product, but you have to be able to talk to different segments within that and not be too exclusive with it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And I think, would you agree that if a brand's new, let's just say they come to your agency and they're like, this is the idea, it's a beauty brand, it's edible makeup, it's not makeup. So, whatever that might be. And then they're like, hey, name it, logo it, package it, design it, website it for me, help us launch this thing. Yeah. You would say that from your experience that they should have a bit more of a target at the beginning and then branch out as they go, or can they start with a branched out selection of audience?
Well, I think with marketing products, at the end of the day, you wouldn't have a business if you didn't have a customer. So people that don't know their customer well, I think have almost missed the point. You can come up with a cool product and something that looks sexy and amazing and whatever, but if there's no one there to buy it, then why are we here? And I find that interesting. A lot of founders start with their ideas because they think they are the majority, when most of the time I would be confident that they're the minority. Most of the time.
What makes you confident that most founders are not their target audience?
Because people are stuck in their little worlds. I mean, we all fall victim to that, I think. We all think, as soon as I became a mum, I'm like, oh, parents, mums, dads, such a big market. But then you really break down how many people need the very niche drink bottle for their toddler. You're like, oh, to get the numbers up there, it's harder than you think. Or going back to niche communities, products go in trends and waves. We see heaps of desserts disrupting the space. We've seen shampoo and conditioner disrupt the shelves of Woolworths. There's always trends that happen, but then you really have to break down, okay, well, how many people are actually walking down that aisle looking for that certain product? It's not as many as people think, I don't think.
Well, we hear this all the time where people get a product into David Jones or Woolworths or Coles and then it just doesn't sell.
Yeah, which is scary. It's really scary. I think we always talk about doing our own products, and people always ask me, why do you back up other people's ideas? Why haven't you done your own? I think it's because I'm a pessimist in that way. I know that it's really hard. It's really hard to make a good product and a good brand and have those two things stick. People think that their idea is the best idea in the world, but everyone has the best idea in the world.
There's a quote I love from a gentleman. His name is Mark Ritson, and he says, the first rule of marketing is you're an idiot.
Brilliant.
And if you can understand that, like, you, the founder, are not the target market,
No.
that's the best advice ever, because then you can just get out of your own way and actually start observing like what people want.
But you also start to learn with your customer as well. I think, again, launching brands to market, you go through different phases, and I guess you've got your birth stage and then you have your growth stage. And that's a really exciting phase because every sale is obviously more than what you made yesterday, well, you'd hope. But then it starts to become this like adolescent, a bit harder to grow, and you have to work harder to talk to people. And I think that's where it goes back to, yes, you can have a good product, yes, you can have a good brand, but you can't just do the same thing the whole time. You have to grow with the customer, with trying to reach new audiences, scale it. Yeah, it's a journey.
Yo, my name's Dane Walker and I am disgustingly obsessed with branding. I had to figure out a way to do branding every single day, so I branded myself. Then, I started my agency, Rival. And hired a team of branding mavericks hell-bent on creating brands so good that they'll make your competition shit their pants. So here's the thing, you want your brand to go viral and Rival makes brands go viral. That's why we're offering you a free 30-minute branding session to get an expert's opinion. If you don't believe me, the proof is in the pudding. Here's what clients have to say about Rival.
Rival is trusted by brands like Nutrition Warehouse, Light My Bricks, and Vumi.
So if you want to absolutely smoke the competition and make your brand go viral, hit the link below and book in your free 30-minute branding session.
Now, when you look at the success of a company launching its brands, when people ask you, what's the ROI of branding? I know this is a question we all hate, but when you think about how you explain this to people, how do you define where the profit comes from when you're building a brand?
That's a good question. Like, I don't think there is ROI on branding. I mean, the ROI is, this is part of your start cost, your launch cost. If we're talking brand identity, like this is part of your upfront, this is how much it costs to open the doors. Obviously, the ROI is, do you make it back within week 1, week 5, week 575? That's not really up to me to answer that or help them answer that, I don't think. Different scenario if they came with a brief of, hey, we've got this epic formulation and we're about to launch this product. We need to sell out of 10,000 SKUs. That's a little bit different. There's more tangible like numbers there that we can work with. But that's very rare. And I think if a client is so set on ROI, it's our job to ask more questions, to understand, well, what do you mean by that? I think a lot of the time they don't even know what ROI is.
Well, we always ask this question as well, which is, like, what does success look like for you?
I also think to the point of ROI is if you're in it for the short term, then sure, whatever it costs to start, you want to see your money made back as quickly as possible. But I think for successful businesses or products to be on the market for years and to last, you have to reinvest back in. So it's just this constant cycle of, okay, startup phase, the marketing budget might be X, which is always lean, but then ongoing, you can build on that because you know that it's proving to work or not work, which is also a scary thing and happens a lot. So yeah, I think ROI is the devil.
I would say it's even near being a red flag for me when I'm talking to a client, because when they start asking me the question like, hey, what's the ROI of doing this branding? I'm like, hang on a second, this is the wrong question to be asking right now. Like, branding, like you said, is the barrier to entry. Like, you need a good brand to crush it with content, to look great, to have people want to click things on your website. It's kind of like, it's having a nice store fit out. It's like asking the question of like, what's the ROI of a nice fit out in my store? It's like, well.
But the other side is, I think, and going back to, you have to be creative but also commercial. So ROI is a very annoying benchmark and sort of phrase, but there are metrics and data that you can look at as a creative to understand if it's working. I think it's important, and if I was the client, I would be reassured by my agency, my creative agency partner, thinking about that and asking questions about that. But I don't think it's my responsibility to understand their product margin and P&L and ROI. I didn't sign up for that.
Now, with people that are looking to approach an agency for support on their branding, what are some things that they should have prepared beforehand?
The biggest problem that I see is when they're co-founders and they're not on the same page. They've come with the idea and they haven't actually spent the time unpacking how they want to unite behind the product and launch it. They're just on completely different pages, on completely different planets sometimes. So that's really hard. I think you need to prepare being on the same page, which just sounds really silly and really obvious, but the amount of partnerships and different people in the room that, some clients bring their mums on the call for a second opinion, or their boyfriends or whatever, which is great, but I don't think that's helpful to the creative process.
I would agree.
And it's actually quite frustrating because they're having these these domestic arguments over, but you shouldn't do it like this. And, it's not really my job to sort that out. It's come with a clear vision and what you want. Be decisive. If you've still got a lot of questions to answer, we can help you do that. But I think as a founder, you need a certain level of integrity, and you have to be able to back yourself without sort of starting with so many questions.
Totally, because you're saying that like someone should come to you with a clear, definitive, at least vague direction. Like, I don't know what house I'm going to live in, but it's this neighborhood.
Yes.
I don't know what street exactly. You will help me find the street, but it's not south of, the bridge. It's north of the bridge, near the beach or what have you. They need to give you some vicinity of direction and understand that they have to honor the creative process. They can't just ad hoc bring their mom, boyfriend, someone in the background is chopping carrots and they're like, what do you think of the logo? Like, you need to bring them into the process. Also,
do your research, do your work. I think as a founder, you have a responsibility to, yourself and anyone you're dragging into this big idea, to know your stuff. Like, don't waste people's time, even if it is paid time. It's in their best interest to have done their research, if that makes sense.
So like shifting kind of gears here, would you say that the rise of social media and the way people consume content and the way we tend to browse platforms like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, how has this shifted people's, I guess, directive when it comes to brand strategy?
I knew this question would come up.
And I know you got the answers for this one, so I'm excited.
I think it's just a constant evolution. For me as a founder, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I feel old now in terms of, as we were saying before, TikTok didn't exist when I started my business. But now it's basically half of a marketing calendar if you're smart about it. I mean, the US has TikTok shop. We don't even have that in Australia. So innovations happen a lot slower here as well. Does that buy us some time? Maybe. But it also means you have to be really prepared for when things do come and jump onto it really quickly. Also, the amount of reappropriating of content to fit the different platforms is crazy. I think back in, 80s, 90s, before my time of actually doing this, you could come up with an amazing campaign and you would book the biggest billboard, and if it slapped, it slapped. But now you have to have the viral TikTok lined up, the billboard, the cool talent that aligns with the brand, the pop-up partnership that happens on the street corner. Your creative mailer has to look sexy to stand out so influencers actually talk about your product. There are so many layers, and that goes back to storytelling. Yeah. So I think if in 2025 the brief was we need a tagline and we need to do a photo shoot and this is our product, I would almost be like, whoa, and then what? What next? You can't, and also the audience we're talking to, younger generation, we were talking about this before, they're so fickle. Their attention span is like, I think it's 6 seconds on TikTok and they scroll next. That's 6 seconds to make an impact on the product launch, what they're talking to, also getting across information in a really clear way is hard in 6 seconds.
It's a lot because I remember sitting down with our team like a week ago and I was looking at like the social media statistics and it's like average view time 4 seconds. I was like, what? And if we get 6, we're like punching the ceiling. We're like, hell yeah, we got 6 seconds. I was like, God, this is crazy. Like, how do you get someone's attention in 6 seconds?
But I also think it's that ickiness about this time that we're in, that it's all about the shock factor as well. We're all just creating things to disrupt and shock and go viral and be disruptive. Whereas sometimes the most beautiful campaigns and the ones that do resonate are the ones that actually do make you think a little bit deeper and just stop and not have to have that chaos attached to it, which, again, I sound old. It's that TikTok mentality of quick, fast, messy. It just, anything goes. You just have to put it up. Yeah. Whereas you also need the considered piece as well.
And I imagine someone like you, and you're a lot like myself, where you're trying to control the narrative, control the situation, guarantee some kind of outcome and help drive your client towards success. When you throw mud at the wall and you're like, let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
Feels a little crazy to me, but that's kind of where the market's at.
But that goes back to, you need a gun internal marketing team to be able to facilitate that, because at the speed at which these platforms are moving and changing, you can't rely on an agency partner to re-strategize every time you launch a product or every time you want to reappropriate your content to fit a different channel. You need the person on it every day to see the trend, see the viral moments, see who the latest face should be and partnership, because XYZ happened and they make a great fit for the latest lipstick campaign. As an agency partner, you actually don't get that insight necessarily. I think as an agency partner, it's our job. Marketing teams can come to you with their idea and then you figure out how we're actually going to put it on the billboard, on Instagram, on TikTok, edmblast.com. Like, there are so many different channels. Yeah, it's a collaboration.
How do brands avoid then with the climate that we're talking about? Let's just say TikTok, 6-second economy. Everyone's flicking through their phones, looking for the next disruptive thing. How do brands maintain integrity rather than looking schizophrenic and constantly jumping from trend to trend?
I think finding your niche and just sticking with it. Like, we always use a few case studies in our sort of strategies to educate the brands that we work with of these are real success stories on that platform. For example, the customs offices in the US, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but their entire following, which is millions of people, for a customs platform, like, why do they even have an TikTok is kind of beyond me.
So US Customs has their own social page.
US Customs.
Yeah.
TGA, that's what they call it.
Okay, yep.
All they post is dad jokes. Like, dorky dad jokes, dads on vacay, dads with annoying kids in custom lines. And that's the way that they've built this following. It's got really nothing to do with national security of the United States.
Yeah.
Another example is Nutter Butter, also from the US. Theirs is like late night cookies and sort of, order your cookie at 2 a.m. when you're gaming, when you're drunk and you want that fix. And so their entire following, which I think is like over 5 million, is all about that Gen Z brain rot and just buzzing out. And it's a cookie. Like, it doesn't have anything to do. You hardly ever see the product in their content, but they've been able to engage their audience so much that 5.4 million people follow that account. And it's all about just dirty, grungy teenager bedrooms, basically. So that's TikTok. That to me sums up that platform of you don't post your big campaign there. You don't have to talk about everything there. Be specific. As opposed to, you've got your more traditional platforms like your website, Instagram, paid, digital, where of course you have to be acquiring top of funnel, like talking to customers, educating them on promos, sales, things like that. TikTok is different.
When you're thinking about places like TikTok and you're trying to work with your clients for their thematics, and just to list some of the clients you've worked with here. Butterboy, Sephora, Afterpay, Bonds, Microsoft, Bumble, TikTok, and heaps more. You've got an enormous portfolio. What are some of the things you look at with these short format platforms like TikTok to help them leverage a fan base instead of just talking about the products? How do you try to formulate a thing? Is it all about entertainment? Is it all about disruption, or is it something else?
Yeah, entertainment and disruption, but also community. I think the nature of that platform is that it's built around UGC, user generated content. For example, with the Butterboy store, one opened and all of a sudden a video of a soft serve ice cream went viral because a customer asked to put that on top of their cookie, and then they got it and squeezed it and it went everywhere. That wasn't a planned thing necessarily by the brand, but seeing the views go up by the millions, you then start to think, hang on, this could be a cult product. So then cleverly flipping the narrative of come and get the soft serve and the cookie. It was almost created by the customer because they're telling you what they want on the shelf, because they're creating content right there and there. They buy the cookie and then they take the video. It's almost the best insight into market research that you could ever have. Same as a beauty product, going from in-store, swatching it at home, mixing it with some random cleanser that wasn't necessarily part of the brand's repertoire, it goes viral. And then if the brand's clever enough, they'll formulate the next cleanser 2.0 to be exactly what the customer created the content about. So I think it's like it's a two-way street as well.
So if in the case something is sensationalized and goes viral, trying to find a way to leverage
That's innovation.
Innovate off that.
Opportunity, yeah.
And in the case where people don't yet have a strategy or haven't yet even attempted to tackle social media, what are some of the things that you tend to look for to help formulate at least a beginning point to jump off with where to start?
I think community. That comes back to who's your customer if you've got your product, who's that who is the product designed for? And then going deeper than just asking, well, where are they? What do they do? What's their hobby? Where do they live? Who do they hang out with? What are they ordering as a coffee order in the morning? What's their weird niche that they're into? Run clubs have been a huge case study for that. Seeing brands sort of rally behind fitness niches. Sport has been massive off the back of obviously the Olympics last year, but I think that's community building. And if brands can somehow find a relevance in that, then it suddenly becomes more than just a product that they're buying. It's, oh, I made a friend through that. I know the people in the comments, in the Instagram post. When there's a consumer event, I know that Sally and Sarah will show up, and all of a sudden the brand has fostered that friendship.
Yeah.
Content off the back of that is authentic.
I think it's really interesting because when you're thinking about TikTok and these platforms, it just seems that every 5 minutes things are changing and the flywheel's onto the next thing, and then when you catch up, it's already moved ahead. So by hiring this younger person, you're kind of giving yourself someone who's on the bleeding edge to internally criticize like something's icky or cringe, like we need to flip it, change it, adapt it, and just constantly try to push ourselves to be up to speed with where the market is, rather than letting the market get too far ahead of us and start to stagnate and then lose market share.
To that point of, I would assume back in the day, like we were saying, the 80s, 90s, it was really led from the top. Creative was very sacred. It was all, this is the CD's tagline.
Yeah.
And they all had to agree that it was good. It's kind of flipped and tumbled, and ideas can come from the junior or the social media exec or the most random rogue person in the room, the baker at Butterboy. And that could be the most genius campaign idea, but it's still the responsibility for the creative director or the senior creative agency partner to know how to execute it and know when to go and when to stop, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Now, would you say that a founder's job is to, if they don't have this team member, you got to do it yourself. And if you don't want to do it yourself, you got to hire someone. But you can't live in purgatory of like, well, I can't hire someone right now and I don't have the time to do it. Someone has to do it.
I know. And that's always the hard part. And as you know, it comes back to budgets. When you're growing a business and a brand and a product, it's not necessarily the priority to hire this social media gun. It's you have to put money back into formulation, to actual product getting on shelves or on the freight to land on shore to be able to sell it. I understand you wouldn't have a business if you couldn't spend the money on that. But I think when we're assembling the creative army or the marketing and brand army, those people that are in the trenches, on the accounts, behind the comments, in the DMs, are your closest that you're getting to your customer outside of being behind a cash register or point of sale. So they really matter and their voices need to be heard. They're not just junior social media people.
So there needs to be a healthy balance between
Definitely.
kind of the old school way of thinking and like the new school tactics.
Yeah.
A blend of the two. If you were to say the market right now and where it sits and how it's moving into more of an AI-driven economy,
Yes.
would you say who's most at risk here? Is it the brand entering the market, kind of entering, red water or like a ocean of sharks eating each other? Or is it the big incumbent brands that have stood the test of time?
Who are at most risk of AI?
Who's at most risk of getting torn up by the market? The person entering the market or the incumbent brand who's been around for a decade or two?
I think it could be either. It's how are they using these tools and platforms and embracing the innovations of AI and what that looks like for their industry and market versus knowing how to still humanize it as well. AI is a funny thing for creatives because I have half of my design team who hate it, thinking they've replaced us, the robots are, coming for my job, versus the ones that can have trained that robot so well that they can spit out images at a faster pace. We can create branding presentations way quicker, way easier at a more cost-effective budget as well because we're relying on technology. It's a balance though. I don't think they're replacing the human thinking and creativity.
I think it's interesting, but what's been your take, your personal opinion on AI in the creative space?
I think it's really interesting to see people either completely deny it and be haters versus the ones that are embracing the innovation and becoming really savvy. But I think it's a balance. I think as a creative, inherently I'm attracted to things that are, visual. It's random, it's rogue, it's all subjective. It comes from just, a picture, an aesthetic, which is really hard for AI to conjure up. So I don't necessarily feel threatened by it, but I think we need to use it a lot if we're going to keep up. And also it, as I said, it really helps with resources. It can be another team member if you know how to train it properly.
Do you think that the component of that is not because let's just say the rationale behind the strategy may be good from AI, then the founder has to then drive that, and they have to understand it and they have to inherently know it. They can't just look at text on a page and go, cool, got it, I'll roll it out. Like, they have to deeply and innately embody that to succeed in the market anyway.
Well, it kind of goes back to, in the .com era when it all launched, when user computers, the Apple, the Macintosh came about. It's not like they replaced the human thinking. Humans were still behind it and designing, and Photoshop still needs taste and a subjective, I want to put this there, and organization of ideas and visuals. But it's allowing us to be quicker and more efficient with our resources. Yeah.
What are the biggest misconceptions business owners have about branding and what it can actually do for their business?
I think the biggest misconception about branding is that, hey, I've got a really sexy brand, of course it's going to be successful. That's not the case at all. We all know of brands that have failed that looked pretty good on the shelf. They looked good in the packet. They had a shiny appeal to it. They weren't doing anything necessarily wrong. But it goes back to, it's deeper than that, and it has to be married up with your packaging looks amazing, your brand, your logos. You've got an epic marketing calendar lined up, but if you don't have any product innovation in the pipelines, if you don't have any exciting sort of community events that you're organizing around that, it gets flat really quickly. And it's more than just a logo. Going back to our original sort of chat around, I don't think a brand is a logo. It is more than that.
Now, moving to disruption. When people say this, we hear this all the time, like, we want to build a brand that gives people confidence, and we want to do it with authenticity and integrity and disrupt and innovate. These are like popularized buzzwords that people tend to throw out.
Yeah.
What do you believe it truly means to actually innovate and to actually disrupt in the world of branding?
It's a good question, because I think what do you measure success off? To me, I don't come from a traditional design background. I didn't study that at university. I never worked in corporate. I never worked for someone else. So to me, things like awards and design accolades don't really mean much.
Yeah.
I couldn't actually tell you the ones that, you need to have on your portfolio to be known for that. But I think a legacy can be built based off successful brands that you've been behind. And that just comes with a portfolio and growing that in different sort of categories.
Why is indecision often the demise for a founder?
That's such a loaded question. Again, this whole podcast.
But I have it at a guess. If you're just taking a stab in the dark, you're like, usually it's X.
Because indecision means slow. And slow does not survive in 2025. You have to move quickly. You can't wait around for 1,000 rounds of edits, feedback, because you shot the campaign last week and it has to go live next week, or your entire idea is redundant if it doesn't. There's no room to sit around and ask questions and question it again and again. I think it also goes back to the best founders back their ideas, and the ones that are indecisive, it's a sign of second guessing and being unsure about what they're doing. And I always think that's a red flag.
And it's a red flag for their team because it's like, well,
Exactly.
this person can't make a simple decision as to like who they're targeting their product to.
Yeah.
That they've spent $100,000 formulating.
You have to go with your gut as a founder. If you don't have that gut feeling, then you'll start to listen to the wrong people as well. And I think you have to be protective of your board, your creative board as well.
Curate your circle and make sure the people that are in that bubble truly understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think also there's a difference between being an arrogant know-it-all versus just being sure about what you want and confidence, basically.
When this is all said and done and your business is at scale, how would you like to be remembered in this industry?
That's a hard question. I think to be known for ideas and creative support and guidance around successful brands. And I think the key word there is successful, because you can work on 1,000 brands a year, but if you're not leaving a creative legacy on the table, whether that is through showing how you've supported scale in a business from founding it, launch to market, to selling, the founders eventually selling it one day, or being able to show that you survive different, I think, stages in growth as well. What we were talking about before of the launch phase is the easy and the exciting phase. But if you can prove that you've been with that brand from launch through to toddler, adolescence, adult, and then through different ownership phases, that to me is success.
If you could put a billboard all across the world, what would it say and why?
I always say to my team and my friends and my siblings, and I think I learnt this off my dad, of there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Ooh, yeah, okay.
There's a few meanings to that. I think contra is the devil. I think you need to be paid for your time, and you need to know how to pay properly for the right people for that service or whatever you need to get done. And I think you would know this, but in our industry, there's a lot of favors that happen and get asked, and that's where the line gets blurred between what's the scope, what's the responsibility. But no, this is my scope, this is my role, and I will promise you that I can execute on this, but this is the price. It's not coming for free, and I don't want product in exchange. I just want money, because that's not paying the team's salaries or the overheads and what it costs to open an agency door. Like, it's not a hobby, it's a business. And I think a lot of founders, especially like founder operators, always pull in their friends and family to go, oh, but we can get it from them. We can call up a favor. It never works. You need your startup costs, your capital, all of your ducks in a row to really know what it's costing you to launch this thing. It's not just a hobby for everyone.
Yeah, it's like you're launching a business here.
It's a business.
And when you talk to people about their BHAG or their big hairy ass goal, they're like, we want $100 million exit. And you're like, cool.
Yeah.
It's going to
cost you
60, 70, 80 grand to brand this thing.
Yeah.
And you have to be cool with that.
Yeah.
No one's ever made $1 million not spending a couple $100,000. No one's ever made $100 million not spending millions on marketing.
And I
It's
think
never happened.
It's definitely, especially as a female founder, I've found throughout the years you get haggled and drilled on price, and people will always question your rate cards thinking, oh, I can get them down. How can we just shave off the edges? How can we tweak the quote? But whenever I've done that and you try to discount or do favors or try to, I think, be creative with the budget, it always comes back to bite you.
Why?
I think it's that mentality of, at the end of the day, it's a business that an agency runs, and you've got X amount of overheads to resource the people and the tools that you need to do your job. It doesn't just happen for free. Hence, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Ever.
I love that. I'm stealing that for sure. Now, for you personally, what's a door that you need to kick in right now to take your business to the next level?
Have a baby.
I think that's going to happen.
Get through that. No. I think there's always what are our shiny, big, long-term goals, and we always have them. I think that's the fun part about being a business owner and a founder is you're in the control center. You can come up with ideas and you can pivot and steer and turn and act and achieve things. It's all basically reliant on if you have that vision, you can decide to do it. And then there's the short-term things. So keeping team inspired, building the right team around you to be able to facilitate that growth. It doesn't just one day you wake up and you've doubled the turnover and you've suddenly got a bigger office and you have all of these bells and whistles that come with it. It's slow. I think people underestimate the nature of how slowly the burn is to get the bigger things that people see from the outside. Does that
Totally agree.
sort of make sense?
Totally makes sense because it's like I've found it like when people are messaging me now because we're now starting to get quite a lot of traction and acclaim, and it's like, dude, I've been doing this for 6 years and like hundreds of calls where clients are like, prove yourself to me. And
Yeah.
only now it's like, they're like, love your portfolio, excited for you to jump in on this project. But like the slow burn and the sheer ignorance and like stubbornness you need to kind of push through this market as a brand in historically what's been done from other agencies for decades.
Yeah.
You know, I can only imagine we're sharing similar battles where it's like we're coming up against these bigger agencies and we're trying to like carve our own path and they're not making it easy.
No, but I also think at the end of the day, the biggest agency in Australia and the most boutique have the same amount of hours in a day. So the playing field is sort of even.
That's a great argument.
I think if you can show up with better ideas and more efficient ways to execute on budget, resources, time, they're going to pick the smaller agency. Yeah.
I've found that as well because, you know, people love the up and coming agency versus the massive one that's been doing it for decades.
Yeah, I always think that there's a sense of legacy that will always be surrounding those, and I don't think I would ever want Hatrik House to become an agency where you have to have whole teams assembled for huge retainers that you lose sleep over at night. That's not really why I do this. And that's really old school. But I think there's something really exciting about disrupting that way. And just because it's been done forever, it doesn't mean that it has to be the way that brands execute. In fact, everything we've just spoken about, those larger agencies often can't facilitate a TikTok account or a small campaign in the way that we could. So, yeah.
Love it. Last question. Why do you do this? What do you get out of building brands?
I love coming up with ideas and building things. I always have, even since I was small. I think my mum always reminds me that even when I was younger, I was building Lego houses and weird contraptions for my siblings to come in, whether it was a fake hotel or a fake grocery store, that I would have everything set up and sell to imaginary customers. And I would do projects for her and just present them because I liked doing it. And I think studying through university and I think that side of the brain is so important. And I think you have to be smart about it and commercial about it, but coming up with the creative is what gets me up in the morning. Like imagery, visuals, aesthetics, and then tying it all together.
Brilliant. I love that. And I love your passion for this space. I love that you hate dupe brands. I love that you want to do original work and that you think if a client can't back themselves, that they're a red flag.
Yeah, be warned.
I really appreciate you being here. I know that you have a tremendous amount on your plate. And I'm just grateful. I love everyone in our industry, and it's really great to hear from someone who's sharing similar experiences. And I'm a huge fan of your work. You're clearly excellent at what you do, and I'm inspired by you. And I think that you've got an exceptional team, a wonderful business, and I'm only excited to see what you guys do next.
Thank you for having me. I think it's important to talk about this stuff collaboratively and know that as an agency, as a fellow agency, fellow brand building lover, that yes, you could see each other and all of us as competitors, but it's not really like that.
I don't see it that way at all. I agree.
Yeah.
I always have an affinity towards like, hey, we're in the same industry. Cool. Like we obviously have a similar passion. I'm a huge fan of networking with those in the same space.